you will have enough time for that. We wish you a warm welcome to the conference on sustainable nautical tourism organized by the Ministry of Tourism and Sports of the Republic of Croatia. Allow me to welcome the envoy of Croatian Parliament, Ms. Martičev. Also, Mr. Tonči Glavina, State Secretary at the Ministry of Tourism and Sport. Mr. Uroš Kandić, State Secretary at the Ministry of Tourism and Youth of the Republic of Serbia. So, all ambassadors, panelists, representatives of the tourism sector, all USAIR partners, representatives of umbrella associations, and representatives of the media. At the end of last year, Croatian government adopted the strategy of sustainable tourism up to 2030, and nautical tourism, which marks a sustainable growth, plays an important role in all this. It is important. This sort of tourism is important to achieve sustainable growth in the economy in general. This is also part of the collaboration within Adriatic Ionian region. Minister Nikolina Brnjac, who is the organizer, is currently at the session of the National Council for Recovery and Resilience. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it is my great pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Prime Minister Andrej Plenković and wish you a warm welcome to this conference on sustainable nautical tourism organized by the Ministry of Tourism and Sports, which marks Croatian presidency for the Adriatic Ionian region strategy. We are also marking the 10th anniversary of launching the strategy and 10th year of Croatian accession to the EU. I am particularly pleased that the Ministry of Tourism and Sports, on behalf of the Republic of Croatia, has been in charge of coordinating the fourth pillar of the strategy dedicated to sustainable tourism since the very beginning of the strategy. And at today's conference, we will talk precisely about sustainable tourism and about the way in which cooperation and coordination within the framework of this strategy can contribute to the concrete goals of sustainable nautical, but also about the best practices in Croatian nautical tourism, which can be kind of signpost or, in nautical terms, a lighthouse for the further development of sustainable nautical tourism in the entire Adriatic and Ionian region. Our focus is on the importance of protecting and preserving the Adriatic and Ionian seas as vital tourist resources, but also on ethical tourism on inland waterways, rivers and lakes. As you know, tourism is one of the important drivers of the economy in the Adriatic and Ionian region, which is truly rich in cultural and natural heritage. Our key challenge is how to preserve the environmental and cultural heritage while developing tourism and ensure social and economic balance. Adriatic Ionian region is rich in waters. It has 3 seas, numerous lakes and rivers, and also more than 70 cultural and natural assets on the UNESCO World Heritage List. And it is extremely important to preserve these resources, not only for the tourists who visit us, but also for all the inhabitants of this area. Ladies and gentlemen, fans of nautical tourism, Adriatic Croatia is among five most visited regions when talk about the number of nights spent by foreign guests in the European Union. Unfortunately, this kind of success also brings challenges. Mass tourism, which has a negative impact on local infrastructure and the environment, leads to pollution, increase in waste, and disappearance of numerous plant and animal species. When talking about Croatia, since the beginning of my mandate in the ministry, we have been dedicatedly working on the reform of tourism in the direction of sustainability. Our goal is to manage tourism based on data and ensure a comprehensive approach to it. We have, within the strategy, we determined the main goals of Croatian tourism: year-round and regionally developed tourism, tourism with preserved environment, space and climate, competitive and innovative tourism, and resilient tourism. Nautical tourism is highlighted in the strategy as one of the special forms of tourism that will be particularly encouraged in this decade, but it has to be based on environmental protection and quality marinas and other infrastructure. Preserved environment, space and climate are the basic resources on which the future development of Croatian nautical tourism rests, which already must turn to green and sustainable practices, both in nautical tourism, ports, and on vessels. Proper wastewater management, reduction of food waste and disposable plastics, saving potable water, and use of renewable energy sources, as well as solutions that reduce the carbon footprint, are no longer a matter of choice. They are an obligation of all responsible stakeholders in tourism. Our strategic orientation towards sustainable tourism is supported by investments in the green and digital transition of public and private tourism infrastructure through the national recovery and resilience plans, as well as the multi-annual financial framework of the European Union. It is therefore my great pleasure to point out that within the framework of the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, call for private entrepreneurs in tourism, we are also encouraging activities to introduce products and services, innovations in tourism and in related activities, which certainly includes nautical tourism. Next year, the first Croatian law on tourism will enter into force, which will enable the management of tourism development based on exact data. The law prescribes tools for monitoring sustainability, key among which are the Tourism Development Index and the system of sustainability indicators, such as, for example, sea quality, consumption of drinking water and electricity, burden of space, actually overburdening environment with tourism and the like, and a satellite account for sustainable tourism. Each destination will have a concrete picture of its current state as well as development needs. The law will, among other things, improve the framework for encouraging investment in tourism, and for the first time it will create a special framework for incentives for sustainable nautical tourism. It will encourage projects in tourism with high added value, as well as the activities regarding nautical tourism for cruises and vessels for one-day and multi-day excursions. In order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from tourism, decarbonization of the tourist infrastructure and green transition of the tourist fleet will be ensured. We will encourage the use of energy sources with low carbon content, which actually means renewable energy sources, implementation of energy efficiency measures, and implementation of environmental protection measures. For the first time, it will be possible to use subsidies for the charter fleet for the renewal or purchase of clean or zero-emission vehicles. This will also enable investments in marinas in terms of receiving capacity for black tanks in marinas. But however, before adoption of the law, the Ministry has already started encouraging investments in the greening of nautical tourism, and in May, the call for projects from the Competitiveness Tourism Economy Program was completed. Among other things, this includes cruise ships and investments in green transition, for which the state budget provides 600,000 euros. Surveys show that in the last 3 years, tourists have also changed their travel habits. They are looking for sustainable destinations, destinations that take care of the environment, where they can experience the peace and beauty of nature and connect with local customs and people. This points that in the future, the success of tourism or the destination will largely rest on sustainability. This is why it's our responsibility to preserve everything, all the wealth that we have in the entire region, because this is the only way we will remain successful and competitive. I'm especially pleased that at today's conference you will hear the results of the Thomas survey on the attitudes and consumptions of nautical tourists for the 2022, which the Institute for Tourism prepared for the Ministry of Tourism and Sport and the Croatian Tourist Board. I also like to thank in advance to all our distinguished panelists who will discuss on the important topics of sustainable tourism. I believe that today's discussion will be an excellent basis for planning new projects that will serve to improve sustainable nautical tourism in the entire Adriatic region. I wish everyone a successful conference and thank you for your attention.
Sigurni smo da će tako i biti. Hvala na ovom sjajnom uvodu. Ono što također treba reći, ukoliko ministrica bude imala priliku u nekom trenutku, i ona će nam se pridružiti ovdje na konferenciji, a mi prelazimo na naš prvi panel, odnosno dijalog o održivom nautičkom turizmu u Jadranskoj i Jonskoj regiji, pa onda pozivam paneliste da nam se pridruže. Tonči Glavina, državni tajnik u Ministarstvu turizma i sporta Republike Hrvatske. Evo, možete ovdje. Također pozivam gospodina Uroša Kandića, državnog tajnika Ministarstva turizma i omladine Republike Srbije, te gospođu Mirjanu Čagalj, potpredsjednicu Hrvatske gospodarske komore. Dobrodošli. Možemo krenuti s vama, gospodine Glavina. Dakle, čuli smo i od ministrice puno važnih poruka i sigurna sam da ćemo sve teme i aspekte održivog nautičkog turizma proći kroz naše panele, ali možda za početak koje su to konkretne mjere koje će Ministarstvo turizma poduzimati kako bi se osiguralo održivog nautičkog turizma u skladu sa strategijom razvoja održivog turizma i to za ovo razdoblje do 2030.
Pa evo, hvala.
Thank you for this question. I would like to welcome all the visitors. I would like to thank my colleague, Mr. Kandic, and Ms. Chagal, and everyone who is here and who perceive this topic as important. I will hope to talk to you a bit more later. The question is very comprehensive. I will try to focus on the most important parts of the answer. I cannot answer all the aspects or talk about all the aspects of this question. In the Ministry of Tourism and Sport, we are undergoing a process of reorganization. It provides a different focus of Croatian tourism in the next 10 years. This reform that we are undergoing is comprehensive. It focuses on several strategic documents. We mentioned the new strategy of the development of sustainable tourism up to 2030, then the national plan to 2027, which is in its finishing phase and will be adopted soon. This is an operative document, and it has an action plan as its part. We describe which activities will be implemented. Also, we state the funding and the sources, how to cover our needs. It is very close to being completed. And we'll have a new umbrella act on tourism, and it was necessary to ensure redefining certain terms in tourism and to establish a direction how to manage tourism. It is very difficult to describe it with numbers. It has to be a very thorough process. That's why we needed a new act, a new law. I think it will serve us well. I would like to thank all the members of the working group and all the participants and stakeholders. I think we are creating an exquisite document. We have managed to ensure funding in the field of tourism. And these are unprecedented investments of 2.2 billion euros. This national plan encompasses a reform that should meet all the targets. Apart from strategic documents that I stated, we have concrete operational documents, such as green bills system, so satellite account system. This is a set of analysis that will be made in the next several years. For the first time, we don't just measure impact on tourism and the way it contributes to GDP. For the first time, we are measuring what is the cost of tourism, how it influences us, what is the cost for the lifestyle. And this is something that is forgotten. Well, yes, that's true. I would like to thank Ms. Marušić from the Institute. I'm not sure if any of her colleagues is also here. They are our partners. The Institute of Tourism for Tourism is our partner there. We have technical support of the Commission. And it's a cutting-edge approach to tourism. We will continue to measure these outcomes in Croatia, in the region, and on the level of counties. All of the counties on the coastline. So let me recap. There is a string of measures, investments, strategic documents, legislative framework, and the new law on tourism, Act on Tourism, yes. And sustainability is a part of all of these. This is a very serious transformation that involves all of us, because experience has shown worldwide and our own national tourism. So there was a national pandemic of the coronavirus, and this has proven that we need transformation. If we want to have a positive impact, this is necessary. And to recap, we're talking about 1.3 billion euros being invested in Croatian tourism. So this is a lot of money. So I mentioned all the measures. So National Plan for Recovery and Resilience. And this is something we'll realize in the next 7 years, even a bit less. We have the state budget. And there is a program financed from the national budget. So you mentioned COVID, so pandemic has left an impact on everything and on nautical tourism. Mr. Kandic, when we talk about situation in Serbia, we talked about this before the panel. What is the pace of the recovery and what is the direction of the nautical tourism in Serbia? First of all, I would like to thank Ms. Brnjac for inviting me here. I would like to congratulate you on how well this meeting or this conference is organized. Let me turn to the situation in Serbia. All of you know that the nautical tourism is different in Serbia than in other Mediterranean countries. We are focused on the rivers and the river canals. We're on the Danube and on River Sava. Recovery of nautical tourism in Serbia? Well, when it comes to cruising, it's neither better nor worse than in other European countries, especially those rich in water and with a lot of rivers. We had more than 500 uses of berthing in our canals. The number of visitors, unfortunately, is not at the level of 2019. It's lower. There are some sign there is an increase of 44%. In the number of cruisers going to Serbia, which points to the fact that probably, according to the forecasts of the European Union and the World Tourist Organization, near the end of this year and next year, we will consolidate of the cruising market, and we will go back to the levels before the pandemic. You know, the tourism took the hardest blow when it came to the pandemic. And the drop was almost 100%. Nothing was happening in terms of tourism in this period. When it comes to the markets, from which we expect nautical tourists, as in other countries, I'm not sure what the situation in Croatia is, but we expect some visitors from the US, number one. Then we have Germany, Austria, France. These are the countries from which we expect tourists. Regarding tourism in general, I have to say that 5.5 months of this year, there was an increase in tourism, in the traffic, in the number of tourists. And we have an increasing number of tourists, 30% more than the previous year. And the records were broken last year in terms of visits and financial gain. Regarding the recovery and percentages of tourists, Serbia is the third in Europe. Tourism is not a primary activity in our country, but this year could be really, really better than the previous. Thank you. Ms. Chagal, you are the ambassador of a macro-regional strategy for strengthening the economic and political cooperation in the Adriatic and Ionian region. We're interested in your experiences, insights on this cooperation in the region. To be able to talk about what happened during this 2 years, so in 2017 and 2019, we need the background. What are the macro strategies? European Union has macro-regional strategies, 4 of them. One is for the Baltic region, the Danube, and the Alp region, as well as the Adriatic and Ionian region. We are interested in the Danube strategy and Adriatic Union strategy. There are 115 million inhabitants. And the Adriatic Union region refers to the 12% of the inhabitants of the European Union. We want to have common goals in the European Union and non-member states. The Chamber of Economy in Split, or those in Adriatic and Ionian region, were recognized as important factors in this strategy. Chamber of Economy, with the one from Ancona, from Italy, were the founders of the strategy. And a number of companies are involved in this. So the impact on the companies and the policies is major. They are the basis of one pillar. They are involved in blue growth, sustainable tourism, and connecting the region. Croatia and Albania is the country implementing this macro-regional strategy. What is your experience? Maybe you can give us practical information. I know you have a series of projects. You cooperate with a lot of stakeholders. Maybe you can give us an example, practical example. In 2017 to 2019, at the very start, I was the mind behind the project. We set 3 goals: educating about the implementation of these macro strategies, then creating the cooperation between chambers and cities, and the 3rd goal was to connect the chambers of Adriatic Union region with the ones of the Danube region. The 1st goal, let's talk about that. We provided training for more than 250 participants from Bosnia, Serbia, and Croatia, and Montenegro. This happened in Split and then in Mostar, then in Montenegro. The result of this was the application to 6 Interreg projects. The funding was provided for 4 projects. 2 have been completed, 2 are being implemented. The 2nd goal, to formally connect all these chambers. We cooperated with the Ministry of the Regional Development and the Ministry of the Interior. We had to also work with the European Commission to get a permit or to implement this. And after around 100 meetings within 2 years, we made a forum in Split. It was a common forum of universities, chambers, and cities. So the title was People and Region on the Move. There were several important topics. Within these 3 days, around 6,000 participants from 9 countries visited Split to participate in this forum. So the second goal was achieved as well. And the third goal was to sign a memorandum on the cooperation between chambers of Danube and Adriatic and Ionian region. So this agreement was signed in Novi Sad. This was excellent. So applying to the projects of the European Union, that's our goal. Thank you, Mr. Glavina.
Can you be more specific now? What are the funds that you provided for the implementation of sustainable tourism, and how are you going to use these funds to support development of ports for nautical tourism? As I said at the beginning, we are talking about 1.3 billion euros, and there are several things that are under implementation, and we can talk about those. So there's a call for strengthening competitiveness, for green digital transition for entrepreneurs in tourism, and investments in public tourism infrastructure and destinations are also part of this call. At sea or near the sea, I'm talking about the amount of 2.2 billion kuna, or 290 million euros. So when it comes to investments for entrepreneurs in tourism, this is the amount of over 1.250 billion kuna only for this segment. But this specific call that was focused on entrepreneurs in tourism had 3 groups, and one of the groups, the so-called group number 3, enabled investments into projects that can be related to nautical tourism to certain capacity. This call was focused on some sort of cluster cooperation and innovation for all projects in tourism aimed at developing new business processes and new investments that can result in increased quality of green transition and digitization, or business operation that can unburden or contribute to sustainability as prescribed in the call. These calls were closed on 1st of March this year, and they're now under evaluation. We have around 32 applied projects, and according to current allocation, we will be able to provide funds for the majority of those. Only a small number of projects will not be funded due to the lack of allocation. Underway is also our call that was concluded and evaluated, and we will now sign the contracts. It was funded by the Ministry of Sports and Tourism, and this year it was spent in the amount of 600,000 euros for nautical segment, narrowly focused on our unique mini cruisers. There are many stakeholders here from this segment. This is something that the Republic of Croatia has come up with, and this is a good practice example because it has been funded since the early beginning, since the boats were constructed, or subsidized since the onset of the project. So these mini cruises are up to 50 meters in length, and there are over 220 of those in our fleet on the Adriatic. And they're specific because they provide a very luxurious tourist product. And this is a premium segment of tourism offer. And given their size, they can dock in all our ports, and they can access the areas that big boats cannot. So Therefore, they are unique, and we have a specific coast, and this is why we have developed such a unique product. And we have developed also a specific program for this. We finance activities related to sustainability. This year, we have been investing this fund into desalinization, or the devices that remove salt from seawater, and then this water can be consumed. And this is important, and you heard the minister at the beginning. This consumption of resources is very important for us, and this is very important at this moment. Then we have these purifiers for wastewater. All ships have this. We're not talking about black tanks only that need to be emptied, but also about brown tanks. And this refers to this water used for washing dishes, clothes, and so on. And we also invest in this part. We also planned actually, we are focusing this program on one part of the segment. Our funds are limited, and every year we do one part. We focus on one part of the market segment, or tourism. And this year we focused on these mini cruisers, and in the following years we will focus on nautical tourism in broader sense when talking about charter and so on. And every year we have part of investment focused on specific part. And we cannot state the figure right now, but this new law that I mentioned, so for the first time when it comes to investments in future, we managed to implement this nautical tourism into all this, because grants or subsidies for investments that used to be part of the Ministry of Economy's projects, we are now moving towards specific allocation for tourism. And the elements of this program are part of our law on tourism. And then the regulation will be adopted that will specifically regulate all this. But I'm very happy that we managed to implement nautical tourism into all this, and this was not possible before due to rules of the European Commission. In the upcoming decade, there will be various programs and measures we'll be able to implement for our tourist segment. And these activities are related to green transition and investments related to sustainability. So this is our focus, not only us as a state, but all umbrella strategic documents. Yes. Mr. Kandic, you mentioned already, but how do you plan the further development of nautical tourism, especially on the Danube? And how important is sustainable tourism and development to Serbia? One entrepreneur dealing with this told us, you have to understand that water, river is the cheapest infrastructure. We cannot see it as a travel infrastructure where you have to invest continuously, open new ports and so on. This is an infrastructure that receives thousands of passengers without investment. So this is true, but there is no serious development of nautical tourism without investment and serious state investment. I listened to my colleague, and these data and figures are very impressive that the Republic of Croatia invests, but unfortunately we are not a coastal country, but we are using our river potentials, and we will make use that. So Danube is a waterway that we have. It has a lot of kilometers from Hungary, so it's completely navigable. And this year we launched a serious project. It's called Sail Through Serbia. There are 6 ports on Danube and 2 on the river Sava, and additional 5 marinas in Sombor, the northernmost part, in Smederevo, and 3 locations in the lower Danube in order to improve the reception of passengers from cruisers. We'll develop a serious port in Vojvodina, and we will purchase environmentally friendly catamarans that will improve nautical tourism in Serbia. This is a huge potential. 30% of world cruising takes place on this river, and we have recognized and understood the importance of all this. So 4/5 of these cruises ended up in Budapest or near Budapest. We were not of interest, and I think the Republic of Croatia has 140 or 150 kilometers, navigable kilometers of Danube. And we want to raise this, additionally improve this, and we want to collaborate. And therefore, I'm here. This conference, I think that Danube is the river that we can exploit together in terms of tourism, because Adriatic Sea, of course, is the #1 for the Republic of Croatia when it comes to tourism and as a resource, but we should not neglect this river either. We are now applying for cross-border projects, projects of cross-border collaboration of the EU, and we are looking for a partner. We're going to see whether this is going to be Osijek, Baranja, or Vukovar-Siem County. We want our Ministry of Tourism and Youth to be the implementer and one of the counties. And the city of Apatin, we want to raise the infrastructure, improve the infrastructure in this part of the river. And I think the Republic of Croatia has 5 ports on Danube. And we want to include this into our tourist offer. Yes, Ms. Chagal, you mentioned good practice examples given your expertise in this area. What do you think about the role of chambers of economy and institutions in supporting the development of the Adriatic Union region? We need to emphasize what is the goal of all these projects being implemented. We need to finalize all these projects that have been launched in this period. We need to finalize them. Some have been finalized. And when it comes to future, for this 1,800,000 companies in the Adriatic Union region, there are also 120,000 various institutions. The most important thing is digitization and their networking and regional development and their harmonized approach. We need to make things easier and simpler, and then the economy will improve when it comes to Adriatic Union region. And then when it comes to Danube region and connection with this region, digitization projects, creative industries are more important in this aspect. Tourism not so much, but for Adriatic Union region is more important. And for companies, tourism is also important. How would you assess the importance of launching this networking of chambers in this Adriatic Union region at the Forum of Chambers? And what key initiatives regarding the sustainable development of this region would you like to highlight? The majority of projects were focused on agriculture, the quality of food, and blue growth, and food coming from the sea through sustainable tourism. When it comes to navigability and use of sea and rivers through sustainable tourism, we need to raise quality and not focus on mass tourism. I think we have reached the peak in this respect, and we should stop counting cruisers, tourists, and ships and focus more on economic development of the companies that exploit or who work in this area, in this field. The quality of tourism, the quality of food, the quality of sea is much more important than mass tourism. And I think we all should work on this. Mass figures make us build new roads, expand roads, building new cruisers. And if we don't pay attention to the environment, it will make an impact on that. And we will not be harmonized and aligned with European goals. Yes, it's important to have a year-round tourism, and I think this will make us sustainable, blue, green, energy efficient, and so on. Mr. Glavina, what are the long-term goals of the Ministry of Tourism regarding the development of nautical tourism in Croatia, and how will these goals be achieved? I would just like to add to what my colleague said. European policies are focused on unburdening and preservation, and it's important to emphasize that we're a part of these policies. We're an integral part of this. Croatia used to be a country that was recognized in the tourist segment, and we were sitting on the sidelines since we accessed the EU in 2013, and especially in the period and the mandate of this government, or the two mandates of this government. Thanks to our approach and how relevant our international politics is, we actively participate in developing all European documents and adopting all European documents, and we discuss about all this. And as a country that is a member of the World Tourist Organization, we are members of the board, and we became members 2 years ago. So this represents our views on tourism. So we are part of this policy, and in the past several years, we have been perceived as a country that works on sustainability and implements specific measures to contribute to Europe and the world. It was difficult in the negotiations with the European Commission when we talked about National Plan for Recovery and Resilience. It was very difficult to convince them and explain to them that it is justified to give us funds for tourism so that we can improve our tourism sector. If we are talking about sustainability, then it's very difficult for somebody to understand that new investments will not result in new figures, new mass tourism, and so on. And all my colleagues who were participating in this process know how difficult this was. And it is not important for us to grow in terms of figures. We want to unburden the peak season, but we need to ensure growth in pre- and post-season. And we need to improve the competitiveness of Croatian tourism, and therefore we needed these funds. And we needed these funds to launch or initiate these transition processes, because without them it's very difficult in financial sense. So all the funds are focused on digital green transition, and this is of measurable value. And if we focus on nautical segment in all this, we have representatives here from various countries, and we develop these policies together with them within Adriatic Union Initiative. And see, when I was a kid, I lived at the sea, and they told me, I lived on the coast, and they told me if you put your finger in the sea, you're connected to the entire world. So in tourism sense, this is true. When there's a problem with waste in Albania, this is a problem, and it's present every year. It has a negative impact on tourism, both in Montenegro and Croatia and Italy and so on. So it's a common issue that we need to focus on and we need to deal with. Quality of sea in Croatia is one of the highest in the world. But if we don't change something, it will not remain as is in the future. So it's important to collaborate in this sense. And through development of this green satellite account system, and also the topic that we talked about yesterday, we want to launch the initiative, the Republic of Croatia, to create a common study or the document that measures bearing capacities, tourist capacities. And this is very complex because at the global level, there is no defined methodology in this sense. If we're talking about the length of the coast, what is the potential of Croatia to absorb the number of vessels, charter vessels, cruisers, small ones, large ones, and so on? What is our capacity to receive their waste? What is the capacity to manage water, energy? And how negatively do they impact the quality? Yes, in peak season, when we see in islands this or small towns, they don't have this capacity. Yes, that's right. I come from the coast, and in July and August, I go to Split Door, or the entrance to Split, and it looks like attack on islands. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds of boats. It looks unbelievable. So these are the topics that we need to talk about. We have here representatives of our nautical tourists, and we have the largest charter fleet in the world. This is good because it shows that we are a unique nautical destination, a country that is better than the others in terms of competitiveness and nautical tourism. We also need to say when enough is enough and when we need to work on sustainability. In many places, there's still room for improvement and expansion. We all know that it would be good to have improved capacities. We are now over 19-something thousand. Several years ago, we were at 16,000. We are improving, but we need to say, okay, where's the limit? At the level of a county or part of the coast, what are our capacities and how much we want to receive? Then we have to, you can do what you want. It is good that colleague Kandic is here, because he talks about examples of nautical tourism from continental part, and one of the key directions of Croatian tourism in terms of sustainability is the development of continental area, because there is no year-round tourism without this. Because as colleague mentioned, Croatia has huge potential that we need to work on. In terms of promotion of tourism, Croatia is a partner. For example, in Chinese market, we are collaborating with Slovenia. We are developing tourist product of these two countries. This is a huge market, and guests coming from these countries are looking for more than one country, more than one city. The same in the US. This nautical tourism and the continental part, cruising along the Danube, is a product that we can develop together with Serbia. And we have, there's a lot of room for improvement there and for growth, and there's a huge potential. And the figures in this segment are very impressive. When you look at these river cruisers, they are very, very long.
Mr. Kandic, maybe you can comment on this. What is Serbia offering to tourists which arrive by sailing on rivers? I would like to divide this topic into three parts. We offer possibly 8 docks on Danube. There are 7 now. 2 have been financed by the European Union. 1 together with Austrian regional agency in the municipality of Golubac. You need to see the fort in Golubac. It's one of the nicest on the Danube. What else do we offer in Serbia? cycling, cycle tourism. This is not linked to nautical tourism. You know that in Croatia you invest a lot in this segment. There's a path number 6 and the 13 going through Serbia. And these routes are very popular. We are planning to develop, in addition to tourism, to add a cycling path and pedestrian path along the Danube. We would like to create 80 kilometers of high-quality cycling paths. And the third thing we can offer is a camping offer. It is in the starting stage, but we have serious plans to expand on this segment of the offer. There is an auto camp in Vojvodina of high standards. Something that is linked to both of our countries. This is gastrotourism and wine offer. I think we have a lot to offer in this respect. Ilok is famous for wines, and it's a part of both countries. We have a number of vineyards, and we are developing together with the European Union a product that will be a major product. This is something we can offer to tourists visiting by sailing through rivers. So there's a space for growth. Ms. Chagal, maybe we could ask you the last question before the break. Again, talking about the Ionian Adriatic region, what are the common topics that should be focused on in future? We talk about tourism. In terms of tourism, writing projects in tourism, this is the focus. Croatia is a part of 2 strategies. It is our role to help our neighbors in writing these projects, how to prepare for accession to the European Union, how to ensure quality, and to get closer to our development. So our topic today is tourism. Various types of tourism are available, not the tourism we had until today. So 50 days of sunbathing in the peak season in August, where you can't enter any of the cities on the coast. You can't live in them. You can't move around. So various types of tourism can or need to lead to year-long tourism. So you have cycling, you have health tourism, you have sport tourism, also sightseeing. I wouldn't call it types of tourism, I would call it activities. We have medical tourism, which should be developed throughout the year. This is not simple. In order to be able to travel somewhere throughout the year, they cannot only have a 3-week break during the summer. They have to get the possibility to use the break or days off throughout the year. People who are working, so age 20 to 60, cannot really. So you cannot allow yourselves to invest in these activities without being sure that visitors will come. Yes. You can't focus only on pensioners to develop your activities in tourism. So school breaks and free days, well, all of it has to be in line to be able to travel. Thank you, everyone. We will have a short break, 10-minute break, and we'll be back soon. Thank you.
Evo, nakon kratke
After this short break, we're going to continue with a conference on nautical tourism. We will talk about attitudes and consumption of national tourism in Croatia, Thomas Nautica in 2022. This is new data. Zrinka Marušić from the Institute for Tourism is with us, and she will present the data. You have the floor. Thank you. Thank you on behalf of all the researchers from the Institute for Tourism. Kolega Sever is with me today. And I will present the research results on attitudes and consumption of nautical tourists in Croatia. And I will also present the draft for a project on development and better management of cruising tourism in the region. We are talking about the results of yachting and cruising in Croatia. This research has been done since, for a number of years. This data is comparable throughout this period. So we implement this research with the Croatian board, Tourist Board, and the Ministry of Tourism and Sport. Our research in 2022 encompasses two segments of demand. So we have yachting and domestic ship cruises. We heard something about these mini cruises. We called it Croatian cruising because it takes place in the Sea of the Republic of Croatia. First, we'll say something about yachting, and then we'll switch domestic ship cruises. The goal was to see what is the demand, how it changes throughout the years. Why do we always talk about methods first? Well, because methodology gives us data on, tells us a lot about how reliable this data is. There were 2,500 respondents in marinas which are available to the public. We used interviewers. Our employees used tablets, and they implemented this interview in 32 marinas and 9 ports. 15 marinas were a part of the ASA system. We wanted to find out who our visitors are, how they reach Croatia, what are the characteristics of the sailing, whether they are satisfied with the time spent in Croatia. The similar methodology was used for domestic ship cruisers, but the sample was a bit smaller. There were around 500 respondents on these cruises from the main countries, outbound countries. The content was a bit shorter because we interviewed visitors upon their return. First, so first, let's talk about the owners of or owned ships. There are two major segments there. We will be comparing results of charter demand, which is around 60% of tourists refer to this, and 40% were owners. So they have their own ships, or they were sailing on friends and relatives' ships, and there was foreign charter, but this was from Slovenia, Italy, and Montenegro, visiting Croatia. So it wasn't rented, the ship wasn't rented in Croatia. So 60% of nautical tourists were on charter boats. About a half used charters. We saw growth of 7% in comparison to 2017, and we attribute this growth to number of vessels increase in the number of vessels. There is an increasing number of nautical tourists who hire skipper. So profile, they are middle-aged, from 30 to 49 years. The average age is 42. We have a difference in owners. Owners are 6 years older than those who rent their boat. They have university education, 40% of them, and some have higher education. When it comes to hotels and private accommodation, we see that nautical tourists are on general of higher education. They're slightly older. Nautical tourists are as old as tourists in hotels and camps. The next important trait of demand, not only nautical, but demand in tourism in general, is the household income. 78% of nautical tourists coming to Croatia have a monthly household income higher than 3,500 euros. So this is a monthly household income. It's important to note is the difference between visitors staying in hotels, private accommodation, and camps. We can say that nautical tourists have more purchasing power than stationary guests. Another result, and more important one, I would say, is the share of nautical tourists with higher incomes is growing. In 2012, we had 49%, 56% in 2017, and 17% in 2022, or last year. Of course, inflation happened and increase in salaries, but this is a more significant growth than the increase in salaries. So this happened in a string of outbound countries. Let's see a graph, the change within these 5 years when it comes to household incomes. We see 2017. You see that these columns, the right-hand columns have grown, and this is higher household incomes. Last year, 20% of tourists visited Croatia for the first time. Charters account for 33%, and owners who have a ship in Croatian marinas account for only 6% of those who visit Croatia for the first time. In comparison to stationary guests, there are much more nautical tourists who are visiting Croatia for the first time than stationary guests. The decreased share of boaters in their first visits. In 2017, we had 40%. We can't be sure why this happened, but Corona might be the reason. You know that after COVID, famous destinations are chosen. On the other hand, we see that charter demand attracted new guests, regardless of Corona, than stationary offer. This is interesting to note, I would say. It says a lot about particularities of nautical tourism. There are a lot of different features when it comes to countries they come from. We have a lot of them coming from Nordic countries, from Norway, from the UK, and owners are visitors from neighboring countries, Slovenians, Italians, Germans, Italians. So we're talking about average values. and they are different depending on the segment in question. We had a chance to talk about the next topic. Our research focuses on those in the nautical industry. These results are used by stakeholders in nautical tourism to show them where to go, what to focus on, how to manage nautical tourism. So this year, we included some questions in the survey as suggested by other stakeholders in this discussion. We asked about viewing experience, and 2/3 of chartered vessels or tourists have some experience, but 35% sailed for the first time on a chartered vessel. Among those who have some experience on chartered vessel are not only those who sailed in Croatia. Maybe they sailed in some other countries. This was mostly Italy, Montenegro, and Slovenia, as well as Spain. The next question we asked referred to charters, and this is vessel reservation. 66% of visitors use online booking in this case. Mostly travel agencies and agents' services were used. Then we have booking platform and booking firm, and then tourist agency. They use a charter company more often than agency. And we have to take into account this is perception of nautical tourists. So nautical tourists answer the question, how did you get your vessel? And there might be discrepancies. Maybe they don't realize this is a charter agency and not really, or charter company, not really tourist agency. We need to prepare our respondents well, so they know what they're talking about. They need to understand the question. And there are always possibility to check the results with the sector. One of the main questions for charterers were the reasons for choosing Croatia as a sailing destination. We asked about 3 most important reasons. The first one, and the most important one, are natural features of this area. And the sense of safety is number 2. Our country is attractive and safe. We always took this safety for granted, but now we see that this element is one of maybe most important elements of our offer, not only in nautical segment in tourism, but in other segments as well. It's important to support this element. Captain Orlic, I think you can be really happy with our result. So after natural features and safety of navigation in our country, there is quality of charter vessels as another criterion. Then the ecological conservation, and 6% talked about favorable price of charter vessels. So the quality of charter vessels is the 3rd most important reason for visiting Croatia. Charters do not visit us because charter vessels are affordable. The main reason for coming to Croatia is the natural features, safety of navigation, and the quality of charter vessels, not the price. How do charters find out about Croatia? Where do they get their information? Previous stay was the most important source of information last year. 5 years ago, this was internet. But last year, we had a higher share of those who already visited Croatia. So maybe that's why this is previous stay is the first reason, or was the first reason last year. Charters rely on social media on recommendations of travel agencies, on websites, on fairs of various sorts. The value of this type of research is the ability to evaluate the differences within a number of years. When we used the internet as a source information in 2004, 19% of visitors used internet to find out about sailing. You can see a continuous growth of the use of internet. Now it's 47%. So you have social media, you can find various information online. Another important piece of data, regardless of internet, regardless of the increase in usage of the internet, nautical tourists use other type of information as well. We have an entire range of sources for information for nautical tourists. So they still use some sources which are not used by other tourists. How do they reach Croatia? Due to our geographical position, but also due to the pandemic and its outcomes, they reach us by car. 29% arrive by airplane. So 8% of them come from outbound countries. Out of those who use the airplane, a lot use low-budget airlines. What can we see in the trends is the increase in the share of visitors coming by plane. So it was 14% in 2012, and it was 29% in 2022. Last year, airplane dropped in comparison to 2019. So charters, if we did research in 2019, we would see that less visitors come by plane due to COVID. How many passengers? What is the composition of the crew? Was the next question of our survey. 6 persons make up crew on charter vessels and 5 persons on their own vessels on average. In comparison to 2017, number of people on the vessels increased by 1. In 2017, we had 5 people on charter vessels, 4 persons on own vessels. So this is a result of larger vessels. And we know this based on the national statistical data. So the number of passengers gets higher due to the larger boats. Mostly, a skipper is hired. You can hire a person along with the ship or separate from the ship. Since the data taken in 2012, there is an increase in the use of hired skipper services. So it's 57% last year. Hired skipper services are used more on the owned ships and ships of relatives and friends. So more and more tourists hire skippers. Another important piece of information, another trend regards how long the tourists stay in Croatia. On average, they stay in Croatia 8.2 nights. Most often they stay 4 to 7 nights, and followed by 8 to 14 nights. Where do they stay? Where did they dock? About half of all the overnight stays is in marina, then local ports. We can't ask tourists about a particular type of a port because they don't know the classification. We ask them, did you stay in a marina or in a local port? So nautical tourists can't tell the difference. It's very difficult for them to say whether it was a marina or a local port. But we noticed one trend. Within these 5 years, since 2017, there is a change in the structure of the overnight stays. So national nautical tourists stay in local ports slightly more than in marinas, probably due to larger capacity. We know that some counties have invested in local ports and made them available to ships. So this might be the reason for the change. Apart from the choice of destinations and ports, tourists tend to stay shorter in Croatia by 2 nights. This is a trend that is evident in Croatian nautical tourists, but also in the world. So authorities say that the stay is shorter, and people tend to go on several trips which are shorter. And this is data clearly visible. One of the reasons for tourists to choose open marinas is the answer to the following question. Where did you search for transit berth? Was it marina or port or on buoy? We see most of them search for free transit berth, and there is a higher share of those who searched for it in ports and on the buoy in comparison to those who searched for transit berth in marinas. In line with the increase of capacity is the increased share of those who really found transit berth. So those who needed it found it, and this share is higher. Regardless of the fact that the stay or the navigation period is shorter, the activity of tourists on the destination is growing. They are very active in our seaside places. So they remain active. In comparison to 2017, the activities of nautical tourists has grown, especially going to the restaurants. It happens more often. 99% of them go to restaurants. When we ask them, do you organize dinner or in restaurants? And there is an increasing number of people who go to breakfast.
Besides restaurant, they go shopping regularly, they visit bars, they walk around nature, they visit local events. In relation to 2017, so 5 years has passed, visit to wine roads and olive oil roads has increased. The offer of this kind has also increased in Croatia in these 5 years. And we can see that this study actually monitors what we are doing in tourism and how tourists and nautical tourists recognize and value this. And this part also referred to satisfaction. We want to see who are these nautical tourists, how they organize their sailing, their trip, how satisfied they are in relation to their expectations. We can all be truly happy because nautical tourists are extremely happy and satisfied in relation to expectations. They're satisfied with what they got. 58% said that sailing was in line with expectations. 42 were stated that this was above expectations. Nobody said that things were below expectations. Of course, when it comes to other nautical tourists, this above expectations is 33%. These are the owners of vessels, and they know what they can expect in Croatia. So, but when it comes to expectations, things are extremely good. Of course, besides asking them when it comes to their expectations, we also asked nautical tourists about the tourist and nautical offer when it comes to our destination. Last year, we asked about 28 elements, including the overall satisfaction with sailing. And all 28 elements turned out to be extremely satisfactory. They were very satisfied, and only one, the possibility of making a purchase in the marina, low. Of course, we are happy that our nautical tourists are happy in Croatia. Our goal is to see what makes them less satisfied in order to improve that part of the offer. Of course, we like to say that everybody is satisfied, but we also like to dig deeper and see whether there's something they're not happy with. So in the study, we change the ranking list. We are not asking them to assess this from 1 to 5, but from 1 to 7, so that the results are a bit more refined. Also, when it comes to these elements of the offer, it's important to say that the satisfaction has been increasing, but the order has not changed, almost has not changed. So as much as the nautical tourists are satisfied with everything, they're the least satisfied with the possibilities to buy in the marina and in the destination, cultural manifestations, restaurant services in the marina, sanitary hubs, and so on. So this partly refers to the marina and partly to the destination. This is always the lowest when it comes to satisfaction levels. And this is something we can invest in and improve our product aimed at nautical tourists. Except for asking them to assess the elements of the offer in Croatia, how satisfied they are. We saw that they are very satisfied. We asked them to assess these elements in relation to other countries they sailed in the past 3 to 5 years. Last year, nautical tourists compared Croatia to Italy, Greece, Slovenia, and Spain. And so brighter color means that Croatia is better, and darker color means that Croatia is doing worse. So almost everywhere we are assessed better. I don't know if you can see it well. Feeling of safety, hospitality, preservation of the environment, cleanliness of the sea, catering services, restaurant services. There are more who stated that Croatia is doing a bit worse than Spain. Berth offer, equipment of the marina, value for money in Croatia is better than in other countries. Maybe they like the Croatian offer and they're a bit biased, but let us look at this short overview. You don't need to go into detail what is said here, but we asked the same question in 2017 and 2022. So the first column is 2017, the second one is 2022. The elements are not completely the same, but what we can see here, how is 2022, these light blue are better than in 2017. So in 5 years, nautical tourists, and when compared to our competitors, they gave us a better grade. Of course, competitors also grew, but we grew faster in providing our offers than our competitors. So these are the assessments of our nautical tourists. When I said that our goal is to see whether there is something that nautical tourists are dissatisfied with, so we have been using this group of questions that mainly refers to social and environmental sustainability of our destination. So we see that actually we asked nautical tourists whether they were bothered by something, crowds in the places, irresponsible behavior of other nautical tourists at sea, maybe waste in the sea, maybe inability to properly dispose waste, and so on. Figures are not as high, but in a way 14–15% of nautical tourists said that they were bothered by the crowds in the places they visited. 11% were bothered by irresponsible behavior of other nautical tourists at sea. So this is something that we have to have in mind in our further development. Of course, we do have this in mind because we are monitoring these social and environmental indicators. The positive thing is that these figures did not increase significantly compared to 2017. So in 5 years, we did witness to the growth of tourism demand, but these figures did not grow. Last year, we introduced another question for monitoring this environmental sustainability of nautical tourism. We asked them whether they emptied brown and black water tanks in the marinas. 2/3 did ask for that, and this is of course related to the offer. We heard that this will probably be the offer in all the marinas, but in this moment, what might be more important is that we can deal with information. We asked them whether the nautical tourists have the information on where it is possible to empty the tanks, and 35% received information only in some of the marinas, and every 10th tourist did not get this information. So this is something we can work on to provide better information to nautical tourists on where they can empty the tanks. And the last but not least important result of our Thomas survey is the average consumption, average expenses of nautical tourists. Given the difference between charter segment and owners, of course, we have to monitor their consumption and their expenses. On average, in 2022, for these 8 overnight stays, if you remember the average overnight stays, the nautical tourists spent 182 euros per person per day. The expense of charterers was 255 euros, of course, because the largest share of this expense goes for hiring the vessel. So on average, 100 euros a day was spent by owners. Mostly they spend on restaurant services or catering services. We could see that they go to restaurants more often, and of course they have more expenses there. But total consumption of charters in relation to 2017 has increased by 40%. So in 5 years, 40% increased expenses, and expenses for vessels grew less than other expenses. Restaurant services have doubled, for example, per nautical tourist per person per charter. Also, when it comes to owners, restaurant services also increased, and services for buying things. Total expenses of owners have increased by 31%. When we talk about differences between charterers and owners, there are differences within these two segments. So we can look at charterers according to their origin countries. So who are the best consumers? These are definitely guests from Nordic countries, British, Italians, French, and Nordic countries. They spend on average 300 euros per day. Among owners, these are Polish, Swiss, British people, around 130 euros per day. And we also asked them how they mostly pay in Croatia. 3/4 use their credit cards or debit cards, and slightly more than 1/4 in cash. There is no difference between charterers and other nautical tourists. So in these 20 minutes, we could see that nautical demand has changed over the years. According to results of the survey, it is moving in a positive direction. The share of arrivals by plane is increasing. Guests are more educated, have more income. The length of the duration of sailing shortens, but they increase the stay. The length of stay, the satisfaction with the tourist offer is increased, and the expenses of nautical tourists have increased. This is would be 20 minutes on yachting demand, and now a bit more about domestic ship cruises. If you remember, so we covered all this in Thomas' survey on the sample of 500 respondents. We're talking about the mini cruisers sailing into the territorial waters of the Republic of Croatia. The content of the study was, again, to see who are the guests coming to these ships. There were less British people last year as the result of COVID, but a lot of Scandinavians, Germans, Austrians, Swiss, people from the United States. They're on average 44 years old, so middle-aged people. The same as previously. They're relatively well-educated. They have college or university education. 70% of passengers come from a household with income of more than 3,500 euros. If you remember, in yachters, this was around 88%, and when it comes to guests in accommodation, it is around 40%. So we attract people with higher incomes. Of course, there are different characteristics regarding the country of origin. So 85% British people comes, 91% from Benelux countries, and 85% of passengers from Scandinavia. Slightly less than charters. We have 27% of tourists who have visited Croatia for the first time, and the majority of them has never sailed before like this. So we attract the segment of new foreign travelers, but we provide a new tourist experience to these guests. They mostly, so due to outbound markets, they come by plane. Around 59% of passengers come by plane, and the rest come by car. An important result, we asked them about accompanying passengers on domestic ship cruises. This is also an important element of tourist demand, and we could see that on these domestic ship cruises, the most representative are double income, no kids, or dinks, or people who only travel with their partners. This is the expression dinks. And this mostly reflects in their consumption, because this segment has the higher income as well. Then after them, they also come with friends and with family members. In yachting, we had a higher share of those traveling with family members than with charters and their own vessels. 7 nights on average, of course, this meets the offer of the ship cruise. We see the activity of these guests in the visiting destinations. Again, gastronomy is in the first place, but then also going to the local beaches, using public transport, rent a car, going shopping, concerts, visiting museums, and so on. These are not the guests spending time exclusively on the ship. These guests do visit the destination, and they're extremely active while doing so. Once again, the same way we surveyed guests on these domestic ship cruises, we asked them to rate from 1 to 7 the offer of the boat and the destination. They were extremely satisfied with the destinations. Again, personal safety, beauty of nature and landscape, gastro offer. We saw that this is an important activity. At the bottom of this list are events and manifestations and entertainment and nightlife. Again, this destination offer, we are improving this, but it is again in the last place. What is important for service providers for these mini cruisers is extremely good assessment or rating of boats, service, food and beverage services on the boat, and so on. So what the boat is offering, this was assessed in a good way. Again, we assess satisfaction on domestic ship cruises above expectations, more than 50%, more than half of passengers assessed that what they got was above expectations, which is higher than charterers or the ones owning their own vessels. Nobody said it was below expectations. If you can see here on the right-hand side, these guests at the domestic ship cruises were more bothered by crowds in the places visited and crowds at sea, or many vessels at sea. Oh, and then the noise in the port or the marina. So this is a good indicator to monitor for the sustainability of our tourist activities in Croatia. When it comes to daily expenses, of course, we need to take into account how this offer of domestic cruises, what it includes. This is sold as a package. Accommodation, of course, on the boat is included. It also mostly includes food on board, but it is not necessarily all-inclusive. Mostly, this is lunch and one other meal. So accommodation and 2 meals. And this also reflects high rate of visits to restaurants. Passengers on domestic ship cruises spent on average per day 338 euros per person, of which the price of the cruise was around 200 euros and 135 euros on average daily were the expenses in the destination. If you can remember, these are couples, double income, no kids. So when we have them in our segment of our tourist offer, they raise the level of daily consumption. Except for restaurants, these guests also went shopping, and they gave more money for culture, sports, recreation, local transport in the destination, so beyond what they paid for sailing, for cruise. Yachters paid their expenses using debit card. These are middle-aged passengers, mostly accompanied by their partner. So a bit less than 30% on their first visit to Croatia. And this was their first experience with such product. They spend on average 7 days, mostly come by plane from outbound markets, extreme satisfaction and above average daily expenses compared to other segments of tourist offer. In this case, charter and owners and guests in hotels, camps, and family accommodation. And allow me to present to you a proposal of the project, Cruise Air.
Unlike Thomas, that gave us a lot of data, various numbers to track our national nautical tourism, Cruise Air contains data linked to USAIR, and the aim was to focus on the Adriatic Ionian region. So the aim was to prepare the project draft for funding. How did it come to this? Member states within USAIR, they suggest projects. Then the steering committee groups select projects that will be developed, and Cruise Air was selected. And it was a suggestion from Greece. So resources of this entire region, 3 seas, a number of rivers, UNESCO sites, all of these are a part of this region. We have a lot of potential for development and in the field of nautical tourism. At sea, there are around 30 destinations in this region, which are a part of cruising itineraries in the Mediterranean. We have 12 in Italy, and there were 8.3 million passengers in these ports of our region in 2019. 27% of visitors visit Adriatic Ionian region, and there are 33% of cruisers. We heard a lot from the colleagues from Serbia about cruising on the Danube. Hungary is a part of this. This is a very valuable project, a very valuable segment, especially to develop hinterland tourism. In 2019, there were 200 boats or 200 ships in these types of cruises on rivers. There was an increase in the number of tourists in comparison to 2015. It was the 63% growth. Let's talk about challenges now. Cruising in USAIR countries is very seasonal. It brings some negative impact on the environment and society in general. There is over-tourism, mass tourism. We are aware of Dubrovnik and Venice. Dubrovnik has been dealing with the issue, I would say, at least partly successfully. And we also see the disbalance in the impact on the environment. In Venice and Dubrovnik, we have too many cruising ships. On the Danube, we have a very high potential for development and a room for growth. So maybe we can focus on smaller ships. The starting point for a project is incorrect management. Active management is what should be achieved. Countries in USAIR should manage cruising destinations together. The aims of Cruise Air projects are what I just said. we would like to make the season longer and maybe reduce seasonality of this segment. We need sustainable growth and management of cruising tourism. So develop this type of tourism where it's not developed, and sustainable management and growth where it is developed. There are 5 parts of the project. We are partners with 6 countries. We should work with Greece, with Serbia, with Italy, with Montenegro. So it's a project that is ready, and we are just waiting for funding. This is it for today. I hope I didn't use up all of your energy and attention. If there are questions, I saw some nodding in the audience, so I would like to answer questions, and thank you for your attention. Ms. Marušić, this was amazing. Thank you. A lot of interesting data, and we will discuss them in our panel discussion. So the topic of the panel is the best practices in sustainable nautical tourism, benefits for the Adriatic and Ionian region. I would like to invite our panelists, Kristijan Pavić, Chairman of the Board of ACA. Another panelist is Ms. Teuta Duletić, Managing Director of the Lucerne Design Center Kvarner. I would like to invite Ms. Nela Slavica, Director of Public Institute of Krka National Park. And we have 2 more panelists, Ante Mandić, Professor at the Faculty of Economics, Business and Tourism, University of Split. Welcome. And Mr. Siniša Orlić, Director of Maritime Safety Directorate with the Ministry of Sea, Transport and Infrastructure. Welcome. Well, welcome all of you once again. Mr. Pavić, can you start? Yes. What is the ecological policy implemented, or environmental policy implemented by ASI? I would like to thank you for inviting us to talk about sustainable nautical tourism, about the impact that we are exposed to, and attempts to preserve all that we have in future. Being the largest chain of marinas in the Mediterranean is responsibility. That's a great responsibility. Our colleagues are doing a great job on larger scale. They give us examples of good practices. There is a number of activities that we are in charge of. We have several certificates for environment and energy efficiency. We try to replace all lights in marina to decrease the consumption of electrical energy. Also, in the field of electrical energy, we allowed our clients to have available charging for electrical vehicles. Of course, some of these marinas don't have a entrance for vehicles at all, depending on the type. So all of our technologies that are available today, and Teuta can continue talking about this, we try to implement all the new technologies in our marinas. There is a continuous training of all of our employees to raise awareness about the importance of environment and sustainability in general. I'm trying not to forget anything and to mention all the important facts. I wouldn't like my colleagues to comment on this, but we'll have a chance to add something. Our attitude to environment, well, it's crucial. Let's talk about numbers in marinas. There is a visible change in trends. So charters are on the growth. They're almost predominant in comparison to owned ships in marinas. then you have to adjust your offer to the fact that there was a change. We implement environmental policy in our treatment of black and gray tanks. Some marinas simply don't have the infrastructure for this. But on the other hand, this is a part of the process. It's done in a systematic way, and it regards all the system, the entire system. Ms. Duletic, I would like to ask, how do you integrate sustainability of ships and practices to maintain nautical tourism? First of all, the same as Mr. Pavlic, thank you. Thank you to the organizers for inviting us. Thank you on my behalf. This is the second day of this successful conference. Allow me to say a couple of words. We're a part of a German group. Our headquarters is in Germany. We have more than 3,000 employees. And we focus on luxurious super yachts. What we are into now is managing experience of clients throughout his lifespan. Our clients today come from industries where them as entrepreneurs and managers manage sustainability in the field of energy. They invest a lot of effort to be responsible in their business. So this is a natural cycle, I would say. When buying ships, they are aware of this, yes. They think about carbon footprint. German corporation influence us in Rijeka. There is a project team in Rijeka with around 150 engineers. The entire supply chain, our clients, our products, have to go through a series of checks to make sure we are energetically sufficient, or actually efficient. Energy consumed needs to come from renewable sources. Along with our strategic partners, with ASI, we try to turn waste into energy. We want to get as much new energy based on waste. And this is crucial. We had a crisis of energy. When it comes to ships, the focus is on propulsion. We talk a lot about hydrogen. Hydrogen is mentioned very often. It's taken into account with
Hvala vam puno I lijepo.
Well, this is a pleasure to hear, I have to say. Ms. Slavica, you are a director of Public Institute of Krka National Park. What does European Union, what are the efforts of the European Union and of the Republic of Croatia about the protection of waters and seas? Thank you for inviting me to the conference. When the tourism strategy was presented last year in Šibenik, I can't stress enough my thrill with it. Finally, our voices are heard. In December of last year, there was a global framework for biodiversity. It requires changes in our attitudes and behavior. It asks for protection of sea and land. And Also, the support to various ecosystems in the sea and rivers. The plan is to protect 30% of the sea. The European Union and Croatia are even more ambitious. This is excellent. The government of the Republic of Croatia and Prime Minister Andrej Plenković have given statements on this, and they support this initiative. By 2030, we should protect 30% of the sea, 30% of the land, but also 1/3 of the sea should have even stricter protected. Currently, there is a lower percentage, but 0.89%, so 0.89%, let me repeat, is protected in the very strict manner. So we will be monitoring this process. We are superficial, most of us. Everybody is interested in their own gain. I hope that decision makers will be brave. I hope they won't come under influence of various lobbies and loud minorities. I have to say, whatever change we introduce, there is a negative reaction in the community. But on the long run, this decision, every decision is seen as a favorable, positive. You probably know that our national park, in addition to Plitvice Lakes, is the most popular national park in Croatia. The numbers are skyrocketing, the numbers of visitors, for example. What can we do? Well, we can manage the park sustainably. And also, when we reach certain insights, we need to act on them to prevent degradation of our beautiful landscape or our beautiful environment and our biodiversity as well. For example, one of the measures of sustainable management is the limitation of bathing possibilities on waterfall, Skradinski Buk, to decrease the impact that people staying in the area have on the nature. Also, national park is not a place where you can fish, so fishing is prohibited. We had to change the code of conduct for all those entering the seas of our area, the waters of our area. They have to follow these strict rules. They have to dispose of gray water tank and black water tank in the right way. They can't allow any of the liquid to get in the national park. We try to use alternative or renewable energy sources. We have bought 5 electrical boats, and we hope to get more in future. Our parks are starting to use environmentally friendly buoys, and there is the issue of berthing. Anchors ruin areas in the seabed. I'm not sure if the audience is familiar with this. So we are talking about areas in the seabed that absorb CO2, and they absorb more than all the forests in the world. They provide a lot of oxygen. It's very important to bear this in mind, to contribute to biodiversity. There is a number of species there. What is very important is to realize that we live off the sea, especially those of us who live next to the sea. And we need to preserve it. We need to preserve all of it that is given to us by nature. We want to keep our environment pure. We want to keep it beautiful. And what we need to preserve was not given to us. It was rented to us by all our children. Well, this conference has the same goal. Mr. Mandic, maybe we can include you in the discussion. To what extent do national and local policies enable the achievement of the EU tourism policy goals? First of all, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for including me in this discussion today. I think the State Secretary Glavina said that Croatia participates in the creation of European policies today. And it's logical for European policies to be implemented on the lower levels and in Croatia, because Croatia is a member state. We can say that we as a country and we as a Mediterranean destination have this legislative framework to implement sustainable growth and development. But we need to be aware, regardless of what we heard today, that we have amazing examples of circular transition, especially blue economy policy.
We have to be aware of the fact that we are faced with huge problem of operationalization of policies at local level, and all the challenges related to sustainable development of tourism are manifested precisely on the local level. And we could hear this morning about this during the panels and the report from colleague Marušić, especially when looking at some aspects that negatively impact the experience of the visitors. For example, crowds in the destinations and similar things. Another dimension that we quite often forget about is that it is very difficult to have sustainable tourism if we don't have sustainable economy. And in this context, the Republic of Croatia is faced with, regardless of a very good political framework, it is faced with a huge challenge. 1/4 or 1/5, depending on the methodology of our economy, is composed of tourism, which impacts us and makes us dependable and threatened or jeopardized given the changes in the market, such as COVID pandemic, for example. And we need to be very careful when talking about operationalization of sustainability, because for us as economy, this is important in the long term. Thank you. Mr. Orlic. You are the Director of the Navigation Safety Administration at the Ministry of Sea Transport and Infrastructure. What are the biggest challenges faced by the administration for the safety of navigation in terms of sustainable nautical tourism? As all other participants, I would also like to thank you for the invitation. And I would also like to thank Ms. Marušić because she made my day with the data she presented. We knew that we were good when it comes to safety of navigation, but it is great to see the opinion of final users. Ms. Marušić spoke a lot about percentages. I want to speak about absolute figures to give you an idea of all this. Because nautical tourism cannot be separate from the traffic in the Adriatic in summer months. Primarily, I refer to fishermen, line, navigation. Around 70% of traffic in the Adriatic happens during summer, during these 3 months, all events. We have around 800,000 ships coming or going out of ports. Neglect boats and yachts. In our registers, we have around 100,000 vessels registered. We have around 4,000 charter vessels, 1,400 boats, and around 50,000 foreign vessels coming in summer. At a specific point, there are around 150,000 of various vessels in the Adriatic. In mid-August, for example, in Split, there are over 300 ships. We are not mentioning yachts and boats. You know, there's ACI Marina in Split, and this is a very dense traffic. And middle part of the Adriatic is more burdened than other parts. And if we manage to actually expand this tourism to the entire coastal area and unburden the central part with this strategy, that would be good. What is the deadline for this? Or the time frame? So when talking about when we talk to all stakeholders, charterers and small cruisers and so on, they tell us about the problems. We try to fit that into our strategies. But we also talk to tourist agencies that work with these small cruisers. And they have to cover some places in their itinerary, like Dubrovnik, Split, Korčula, and so on. And when on Saturday morning there are 150 such ships or boats going out from one port, they can go to several ports. So these 150 boats is dispersed then to several ports, and then we are faced with these problems like crowds, dense traffic, and so on. I will ask the same question to you. Do you also think that we should dislocate all this to expand all this along the coast? Is this feasible or no? I think this is something we should insist on. One of the reasons why we want to construct a new marina in cooperation with Lursen, is in order to disperse this pressure faced by Dalmatian waters. When talking about what colleague Orlic said, from the moment when you start with an idea until you implement this project of a port, 10 years goes by. But building a boat or a ship takes a year or two. So it takes more time to create infrastructure that could meet the demand. And this is the reason why there are pressures in some locations that the infrastructure cannot meet. And definitely, yes, I think that the dispersion to Kvarner area and the areas of Rijeka is big enough. I come from Dubrovnik, and I think these Kvarner waters are good, and this should be covered by this. And I think these two destinations are not too far away. We mentioned ACI Rijeka Marina. This is the most advanced marina in the Adriatic. So can you tell us which technologies from the aspect of sustainable tourism will be implemented in it. So use of waste as one of the technologies that will be used for energy production. These are two dominant technologies that can be implemented into this marina. And energy efficiency has been mentioned already, so electricity management, optimization of consumption, all the technologies that exist. So number of technological solutions that are now under research and implementation. Ms. Totic, I can only add to what Christian said. Everything is part of is in the domain of green transition. We want to use the methodology of digital twins. ACI and Lursen are currently collaborating, and ACI knows how to manage the marina, that's their forte, and how to be as efficient as possible in this respect. And what we are doing right now is that we are trying to create a virtual marina where one can manage client experience. Exactly what Ms. Marušić talked about. This is data that the smart marina should monitor on a daily basis. We need to know what are the habits of our and car industries, in other industries. We need to integrate this in the domain of the marinas. So we think we're moving in the right direction in order to meet clients' demands. Do you have an idea or time framework within which we could see specific advancements? So last year with ATSI, there was an effort from the last quarter last year. We had a quick win. We're developing minimum value product, and we want to test and challenge Marina and to see what are the things that we can improve in order for technology that is coming to ACI Marina to be bulletproof, proven technology, tested technology. We're talking about the period of the next 2 years where this should be physically tested.
Krka, točnije recentni događaj.
There was a recent event, I think everybody is aware of this. Last week there was a German vessel to enter the protected area. There was a damage to the seabed and the vessel sank where this type of ship wasn't supposed to be present. How dangerous is this? This was a precedent, luckily at least. It's not the first time in history that somebody did something as silly as this. And the National Park, Krka, was teased that often that we have these events that happen for the first time in history. Okay, so a German tourist, a couple, decided to do this after a wonderful experience, obviously, of the previous night. 7 a.m., our Romeo decided to go from Skradin to Skradinski Buk. Luckily, after 400 meters, after entering the protected area, the propeller touched the sea, actually riverbed. Fortunately, there wasn't any pollution, and so we will consider this a silly story that we will repeat until the end of our lives. I would definitely want to stress that in this case, it is very important to be coordinated. All authorities and services should work together. I would like to thank the maritime police and the management of the port, the reaction of whom was timely. This gentleman was under the influence of alcohol. The ship entered this protected area at highest speed. We couldn't prevent this, and safety of employees is of main concern in this case. We couldn't react sooner. And when the ship stopped moving, the speed was shown on the instruments was at its highest. And they said that it's none of my business whether they are sailing in this area. Luckily, the police was near. He was charged right away, yes. We charged several fees. So there is a fee they had to pay, so several thousand euros. There is a fee charged for a person entering this protected area, for a vessel entering this protected area. They were under the influence of alcohol. This was an additional mishap. And I think they will remember this silly move, let's say, for a long time. But joking apart, pollution could have occurred. Yes, there was gas, there were various liquids in the ship, but my employees are ready for unexpected events. They set floating barriers around the ship in case of spillage, and they would have stopped it if it happened. Thank you. Thank you very much. We hope we won't have unprecedented events like this again. Mr. Mandic, I think you mentioned circular economy. In what way is the concept of circular economy integrated into the new tourism development strategy in the Republic of Croatia? Well, I mentioned it, yes, because it's linked to a lot of topics we mentioned today. So policies of the European Union support circular economy in general. Our strategy creates a framework for circular transition. What does it mean? It means to diminish negative impact on resources. We won't like to reduce the waste produced and many other topics that mentioned by my colleagues as examples of good practice. What is also important is to think about the local level, to spur stakeholders on local level to get involved in these processes of circular transition. Operational side of our strategy will encounter major challenges on this level. We know that tourist destination and managing it is very complex. A number of stakeholders are involved. So we have accommodation, we have transport, we have services in nautical tourism. And all of these categories of stakeholders need to be strengthened to be involved in the processes of circular transition. We have digital transition and on the one hand and circular transition on the other hand. What they do in their marinas actually shows how complex the process is. What can help this process? How can we make sure that something that is currently just a piece of paper to become practice? How can we do it quicker? There are two things to take into account. The system of tourist board is wonderful. It's an example of good practice, but it is very complex. Complexity of the system often limits implementing measures in practice. This means that in the next 2 or 3 years, if we want to have a rational strategy, we want to focus on the local level, on communication between regions, counties, cities, leading tourist destinations. We need to strengthen the directors of tourist boards for what they want to achieve for in the strategy of tourism. They need to communicate these to stakeholders. Every destination is a different story. When talking about Split, you have a lot of service providers in accommodations. You have agencies. You have agencies linked to nautical tourism. So I would like to illustrate how complex this challenge is. But this doesn't mean don't put in effort into this challenge. So local level is what happens in practice, especially during summer months. Mr. Orlic, what are the most important rules that owners of ships have to obey to make sure they're safe? Safety of navigation in Adriatic is regulated in law and regulated by ordinances. So the way you behave, let's say, at sea is the same in the entire world. If you allow me, I will talk about statistics once again. Ms. Slavica mentioned one case. I mean, we have around 1,000 cases like this a year, 1,000. And this is a reduced number. We had 1,200. Now we have around 1,000 cases like this, incidents, let's say, and around 400 to 600 of them have search and rescue at sea. So this is another type of an incident. This is what nautical tourists think about when they think about safety. We are trying to improve our system, both search and rescue and inspector services. But it is difficult to coordinate any service that is provided throughout 12 months, but which works at full capacity or even over its capacity during 3 months of the summer. So one ship cannot cover 5 different destinations at the same time. The burden is too much. When we analyze the incident that happened, which is obligatory for every incident, this incident at sea is normally not linked to how well you know the rules or how to get the permit. In most cases, there is negligence, not checking the weather forecast, not checking the gas supply on your ship. Well, I have to say arrogance. This is what we witness in roads, and it's the same behavior we see at sea. We have jet skis. We have this incidents similar to the one in the National Park Krka. So you mentioned that this number has been reduced. This is good. But subsequently, there might be a case of pollution. How often does it happen? Not very often. Everybody is very sensitive to pollution nowadays. So Ms. Slavica mentioned diesel. Christian, my colleague, knows diesel evaporates after a day or two. You don't have a lot of pollution. The problem is oil. There are certain ships that use a type of oil as fuel, and pollution like this is very problematic. And we had several cases like this in a few years. With a small amount, you have a major pollution of a large area, and the cost is very high, the cost of cleaning the sea. What I would like to say, if you have a question at any point for our panelists, you can raise a hand, and you'll get a microphone if you have a question, so feel free to ask any of the panelists. And while you're thinking about question, we'll continue.
Kako hrvatski nautički turizam stoji po pitanju zelene
So, what is your general idea or assessment on the Croatian tourism in terms of green transition and sustainable tourism? Everybody who spoke before me showed that we are aware of this, and we know that we need to talk about sustainable development, and in order to preserve what we have. Of course, there's a lot of work ahead. Things are changing in the world, technical habits and responsibility of individuals. There are some things you cannot impact on, but things we can impact. We could say that this is, I would give it a very good grade, and we are moving towards, or -5. It's the end of the school year, so we need to assess it now. We do a good job. Nautical tourism in Croatia, I work in this industry, and I had the opportunity to talk to colleagues all over the world. And we could see the comparison with competitive states in the Mediterranean. We do a great job. And this is one of the segments we can be proud of. Ms. Duletic, where is the room for improvement? But something that can be done relatively quickly and changed for the better. We already mentioned the strategies and all these wishes. I think we need for these things to become visible. These things need to become operational as soon as possible, and we should be able to provide an even better service to our clients. I think Europe imposes trends to us when it comes to energy efficiency, carbon footprint, and so on. This is something we will have to respect simply, and it will happen with us or without us. And we need to start doing it physically. Question for your group. Do you have some specific examples? So you cooperate with other stakeholders in nautical tourism to achieve sustainability at a global level through strategic partnerships, through clusters. We have an innovation maritime cluster, and ACI is the member of it. We are connected to the University of Rijeka, Zagreb, and Split. As Ms. Slavica said, creation of an ecosystem that is then more robust, and we have all the key stakeholders gathered together, and this is the way forward. So this is the way, by gathering, networking. Ms. Slavica, what do you say? National parks are of special importance. So what do you think can be improved in your segment for these areas to be additionally protected? Supervision of docking, education. is the most important. A huge problem is of sea parks. More than us managing rivers, because it's easier for us to control the entrances to the park. But reception of gray and black tanks must become an obligation in all marinas and ports. Ecological buoys need to exist, and we need to educate nautical tourists not to throw their waste away, but to recycle it and to dispose it at ports. We need to work on the protection of our cultural and historical heritage located under the sea, because we know nautical tourists like to dive as well, and sometimes they like to take something with themselves, take something home as a souvenir. So we need to protect that. And also when it comes to fishing, we are all witnesses to climate changes. We're all witnesses that seas are getting warmer, more acidic, that there's a crisis of biodiversity, and if we don't act now, I don't know when we will be able to act. Mr. Mandic will now expand the topic. So, to what extent do cross-sectoral policies create a framework for the sustainable development of tourism in rural and underdeveloped areas in the Republic of Croatia? This is a quite complex question, the question of cross-sectoral. Yes, we mostly focused on the area that is developed and attractive, but what about these other areas? Well, I think that in general we can connect this very well with what we heard about today, especially when talking in the context of nautical tourism in protected maritime areas, for example, Kornati and so on. And they are seen as remote areas in the nomenclature of European Union. It's important to mention that cross-sectoral policies have the task to create a framework for sustainable development of these areas, and this actually implies the use of sustainable tourism as a generator of development of local communities. An important challenge we are faced with as a destination is relatively low level of inclusion of local communities in value chains, whereby revenues do not generate a positive developmental effect for the local communities, but profit very often goes somewhere else. In this context, when talking about cross-sectoral policies, we have great expectations of a new agricultural policy of the EU that will be adopted and that will be of key importance for protected natural areas such as Krka National Park, because it will point to a way how we should operationalize circular transition at the local level. Mr. Orlic, you talked about the current state or state of play when it comes to crowds and so on. So how does your administration, together with port authorities, prepares for the future tourist season, given the growing popularity and demand? It might be a record year. Well, this is our usual job. It seems to me as if we are sleeping until May or June, and then everything just wakes up. Suddenly, there are no special preparations. We are trying to train our people as much as possible so that we are able to react as soon as possible. I can say that we started renewing the fleet of port authorities. So in the upcoming years, our fleet that is over 20 years old should be replaced in the future, and I hope we will gain in efficiency, this way. And the job of port authorities does not only refer to safety. We control the entire traffic on the Adriatic from the entrance of boats through Odrant to final destinations. We have systems to monitor the entire traffic. The problem is harmonization. International conventions refer to boats. The segment we talked about is not covered by international conventions. And now we are in a situation where two different worlds mix. Boats covered by that we monitor with radars and other systems, and we know at every moment where they are, how many people there are, what kind of freight they're carrying, and so on. And then we have this other segment where we have pleasure craft and yachts, not covered by the convention. And then we have a mix of two worlds. One that is very systematic, and the other that is not. And we don't have the regulations here. And these are some problems in this respect. And port authorities do not only deal with one segment only, but their primary task are ships. So you want to say that legislation should be amended to make your tasks, job easier? Well, yes, of course, we have. If we had more funds, maybe things would be easier. I will mention once again, it's difficult to design a service for 3 summer months, and we have to have employees all year round. Wait, are there any questions from the audience? Maybe could you give them the mic?
I come from the Ministry of Tourism and Sport. This is a very crucial topic. I would like to congratulate all the panelists who were excellent. I would like to go back to the question that was described by Mr. Glavina, State Secretary, linked to capacity of the Adriatic. How can we measure it? Would the study be useful? And this is a question for Professor Mandic and for others as well. Thank you. First of all, thank you for your question. It's very interesting, especially because State Secretary Glavina announced the methodology for tracking capacity. I have to say that I have positive emotions towards tracking capacity of destinations. It can be a basis for adequate measures for influencing some negative impacts of nautical tourism. We have to be aware of the fact that tourism is very complex. It takes place in a destination which is not always an administrative unit. And person can visit, while staying at Split, also visit Dubrovnik and other destinations. And this is a major challenge. Tracking capacity is a major challenge. This is one of the reasons why European Travel Commission is talking about the International Union for Conservation of Sea is as a part of the managing board, is the fact that this capacity measuring is being abandoned. There are alternative options. So levels of acceptable changes in the system, this is what is being tracked today. And in the bottom line, we go back to accepting the fact that tourism is always a trade-off. It means if 1 million people visit a destination, visit a Croatia within 3 months, as we have seen, this is something that really occurs. We have to be aware to sustain certain changes. If we define upper limit, operationally it won't mean a thing. And the study of our colleagues from the Institute for Tourism for the county, if we don't create spatial plans for this and decide not to create, not to build a marina, and if we want to compare ourselves to Barcelona, we have to say that no Airbnb unit can be registered anymore. We have to have strict limits. We might decide that the prices in Dubrovnik for renting for a rental area are very high. This is a way to regulate how many rentals you can have in Dubrovnik. Without these measures, we can't use this capacity information. If you connect it to infrastructure, if you connect it to the fact that this area is available 4 months in the season, then we see that the things don't work the way they are described. Mr. Pavic, what do you say about capacity? Well, they are not endless. They have limits. We need to regulate them. When we talk about methodology, how to do it, well, I would leave this to the experts. What I see from the practical point of view and from marina management is the following. There are limits. They need to be defined. In what area are they implemented? I think that the area of Split has reached more or less its limits. And if all marinas that are mentioned in the spatial plans will be built, then definitely the structure of nautical tourism would change significantly. There would be new dynamics. There has to be a limit, and it's difficult to set. It seems this is difficult to measure. Certainly, there are some tools that can be used. Mr. Orlic, I'd like to add something. As far as I know, this is the only marina in a national park. Do we have another question? Any questions? Microphone is available. I can answer how we decide on sustainability. Protected areas manage their area based on plans. And they are made based on research and monitoring. We are currently undergoing the process of listing natural habitats, and this process will give us answers. What are the changes in our ecosystems? I think this is another way to secure sustainable tourism. From the Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development, these experts will definitely be available and provide help to the Ministry of Tourism and Sport in order to reach a conclusion and preserve our wonderful nature and environment the way it is. So synergy and unity. We have another question. I'm with the Ministry of Tourism and Sport. Maybe I'm repeating myself, but Ms. Teuta, I would like to ask the following. Nautical tourists could have an app to give you data crucial for you in order to track their interests and their behavior in Croatia. Is there something like this today? Is it being made? Thank you for asking this question. This is one part of the solution that we are preparing. Smart Marina, our digital twin, has two interfaces. One of these is an app. Another domain is backend interface. We take all this data from the app and analyze it. We get push notifications, we get questions. All of it is a part of the experience. It shouldn't be too tiresome. This allows you to govern, to manage experience of our tourists. This is something we are working on currently. We are trying to make the service of ACA Marina comprehensive. This question is linked to a lot of interesting data presented by Ms. Marušić. Were you surprised by any of the data presented? I didn't hear the question, but I just heard that the helicopter entered Čikola. I will have to excuse myself because I have a crisis. I have to see what's happening. I apologize. I regret to see you leave. I wish you all the luck. Thank you. A helicopter? Yes. Well, flying above the park is forbidden in 500 meters above the park, but I have to react. There'll be journalists. I see the journalists have found out about this. Thank you for inviting me. I need to leave. Let's touch upon safety. If I saw the slide correctly, Spain seems safer than Croatia. I was surprised by this. Is it true, Ms. Marušić? Spain, is it safer than Croatia? Was it linked to safety? Safety in the country. The interpreter cannot hear what is said in the audience because they're not using a microphone. Were you surprised by something said on the slides? Well, I wasn't surprised. We have experience with tourists' input. We are familiar with the trends in traveling. Mr. Orlić, were you surprised by any of the data? No, I was pleasantly surprised, I have to say. I would like to refer to the previous question. There is an app of the Ministry of Sea, which is called Nautical Information Service. It's been around for 3-4 years. It has around 100,000 subscribers, or actually users, somebody who downloaded the app. And I think you can find interesting information there, starting with ordinances, marinas, availability. What is the problem there? The changes in the data. The data is not changed automatically. If there is a new berth, it is entered later on in the app. It needs to be organized better, I think. But the app is available in 10 languages. I think it's very good. So this is my experience. We have another question, I think. Alexandra Kartašević from Montenegro. I'm an associate to the Minister of tourism development. I had a need to thank the Ministry of Sport for inviting me. In Montenegro, we are making a program of nautical tourism. I heard a lot of useful information from you. I'll be free to contact you in future. It is my opinion that Croatia has experts in this field of nautical tourism. Thank you. And this was a pleasure. Thank you. Do you have a question? Maybe you didn't get all the answers. I'll have a million questions, but I'll leave this for written correspondence. Any other question from the audience? Can I ask a short question, please? From the perspective of charters, I see colleagues from experts. This sounds banal. Mr. Glavina commented on this. A rhythm of sailing from one destination, Split, Šibenik, Dubrovnik. Everybody goes on the same day, leaves the port, departs on the same day. The route is similar, itinerary is similar, and similar date when they return to Marina. A couple of years ago, we tried to make changes, but it's difficult to do it alone. In practice, it's very difficult to implement, and it really helps all of us. Let's change the rhythm. And whether it's Wednesday or Thursday, it's important. And in the date when you start your journey is adjusted to the flying schedule. Can you imagine traveling on a highway where there's a lot of traffic, or when you leave the port where there's a lot of ships? So you start your journey. If only 20% of the fleet started on a different date, this would make a major difference. So there is a very small group. Imagine being at sea near Hvar, the island of Hvar, which is half empty. You have Friday afternoon and Saturday, which is completely empty. Kornati, also empty. This is favorable for visitors or actually tourists who are there on this particular date. So if we shifted the schedule by 2 days within the same capacity, without cutting capacity, which is also a solution that I would use carefully, but if we were able to do this, and that's definitely you have to agree on this with airports and other shifts, this would make a major difference. And this survey, if it's not too late, I would like to implement this question in the survey. Ask tourists whether they're aware of the benefits of this change, whether they would be ready to change the day of their departure or arrival, because cruisers arrive on the same day. Excellent initiative. Doctors come more often. Maybe within 2 weeks, maybe they could go on vacation from Wednesday to Wednesday. You had more tourists who traveled, who stayed for 2 weeks somewhere. This would make a much better product. Those colleagues who have this experience maybe can comment on this. It sounds banal, but actually, it would make a major difference. Travel agencies cannot sell a route if Hvar and Brač are not a part of it, and they will continue to be on the route, but not on the same day. What do you think?
First of all, we can differentiate between charter and owners. I think owners are aware of the situation out in the sea and they adapt their itineraries. When I look at this, I can see by the intensity in the marinas, I can see the itineraries.
Korčula ide Vrbovska i točno vidite kojim danom je dinamika kretanja grupe čarteraša koji idu sa to. Naravno da ovo što si rekao je stvar koja bi bila vrlo dobro za cjelokupno, jer bi mogli povećati broj ljudi koji su na moru, a dobiti kvalitetu više. To je jedna stvar koji vrijedi, mislim, i u kruzingu, u Dubrovniku, ako pričamo, gdje pokušava se taj razvuć, mislim da bi bilo i kapetaniji onda jednostavnije optimizira svoj broj ljudi nama po marinama i svima jednostavno, ali činjenica da to vršno opterećenje koje imamo vikendima je takvo. Koliko vi možete sa svojom ponudom ostaviti dio flote koji ide srijeda, pa da zajedno napravimo nešto, mislim da evo i nas dva radimo aktivno i kroz udruženje Nautike pri HGK, da ima tu prostora gdje zajednički snagama možemo stvoriti neku novu ponudu na tržištu pa vidjeti kroz godinu dvije kako tržište reagira.
Baš tako. Sve povezano.
Tako da to je nešto što mislim da je neka moguća mjera privremena.
Hvala puno. Ukoliko nema pitanja, jel ima još netko pitanje iz publike? Jel ima? Može.
Ispričavam se, iz Ministarstva turizma i sporta. Dakle, puno smo pričali sivi, crni tankovi voda. Često se dogodi da navečer kad se parkiraju jahte, čarteraši, pogotovo velike jahte, one upale svjetla. I onda imamo situaciju gdje nam je u navečer imamo dan. Životinjski svijet koji je ispod tih brodova, pretpostavljam isto totalno doživi jednu zbune se. Šta imamo po tom pitanju? Da li se nešto radi u tom smjeru? To uopće je pitanje za
Pardon, nisam vas baš dobro polovio. Svjetlosno onečišćenje.
Da. Znate navečer kad imate te prekrasni brodovi pa upali svjetlo, pa to je dole...
Za sad se ne priča o svjetlosnom onečišćenju u moru. Znam da se priča o svjetlosnom onečišćenju na kopnu, međutim priča se o onečišćenju bukom.
Točno.
I u tom smjeru se sad vode rasprave. Naravno, Europa je predvodnik svega, nekad je to dobro, nekad to nije dobro, zato jer su vam onda ova druga tržišta manje opterećena nekakvim i administrativnim i svim ostalim davanjima, jer sve to na kraju, sva ta zaštita košta. Tako da, govorim, za svjetlosno zagađenje ili onečišćenje mora se za sad ne priča, ali priča se o onečišćenju bukom. Evo.
Tako da bolje onda da onečisti malo svjetlost.
A i bit će romantičnije pa će potrošnja biti bolje.
Manje zlo.
Ako nema pitanja, puno vam hvala, poštovani panelisti. Mislim da je zaista bila super zanimljiva, korisna rasprava i da je vama bilo interesantno. Kako vrijeme leti, mi smo tako došli do ovog završnog obraćanja, a tu čast ima gospodin Robert Pente, evo iz prvog reda, ravnatelj u Ministarstvu turizma i sporta. Dobar dan vam, dobrodošli i izvolite.
Dobar dan, poštovanje svima, pozdrav, lijepi. Evo, mene je pripala čast da završim ovaj vrijedan skup i vjerojatno je to zbog nekog iskustva koje već, evo, često to se zna spomenuti 30 godina u Ministarstvu turizma, pa onda i tema mi nikako ne smije i ne može biti strana. Ona je samo drugčije dimenzionirana s obzirom da živimo u doista vremenima koja su puno izazovnija nego ona koja su bila i ratna, bih čak rekao, koja su bila teška, potpuno nenaklonjena turizmu, ali su, kako da kažem, bila dosta prosperitetna i vrlo vjerojatno smo razmišljali kako će stvari ići sve bolje i bolje. Sada baš i nisam siguran da djelovanjem koje općenito imamo možemo si jamčiti neku jako svjetlu budućnost ako doista ne počnemo drugčije promišljati o onome kako i na koji način živimo i radimo, kako se odnosimo prema svojoj okolini, prema svemu onome što se u njoj događa vezano za klimu, za ove promjene koje će zasigurno na turizam kao jednu vrlo osjetljivu djelatnost, izuzetno elastičnu, imati značajan utjecaj. I tu smo mi kao ljudi koji se bavimo tom djelatnošću možda i prvi koji moramo primjerom pokazati kako i na koji način ćemo se u budućnosti odnositi prema tom problemu, prema tom izazovu, prema onome što nas zapravo čeka, jednoj tranziciji koja će doista taj ključni naš resurs, a to je klima, okoliš, more, od čega živimo bolje i kvalitetnije očuvati za budućnost, odnosno za generacije koje dolaze. I to je nešto što mora biti poruka ne samo ovog skupa, nego svakog skupa, bez obzira da li je tema održivost, da li je tema zeleno, Green Deal ili nije. To mora biti prvo o čemu moramo promišljati kada donosimo bilo kakve odluke, zaključke za razvoj turizma i svih drugih djelatnosti kojima se čovjek danas bavi. Teško je tu se reći, vjerojatno je puno tema ovdje otvoreno. Panel i koji su bili, ovaj sadašnji i onaj prethodni, su dali vjerojatno vama dosta odgovora na neka pitanja s kojima ste se susretali. Međutim, završno, ja bih samo jedan sukus napravio onoga s čime smo se mi u ministarstvu susreli i ovih zadnjih 3 godine i kako smo počeli sustavno zapravo pokušavali rješavati probleme, pa i oni koji su vezani za nautički turizam. Znamo, svi došao je nacionalni plan oporavka, turizam se susreo sa pandemijom, sa svim onim posljedicama te pandemije koje se dogodili. Potreban je bio oporavak, prije svega turizmu, opet ponavljam, to je doista elastična i osjetljiva djelatnost. Ako je ko osjetio na svojoj koži pad prometa, nedolazak, zabrana putovanja, zabrana druženja, sve ono što zapravo turizam danas jest, i to je prepoznala i europska politika. Kroz taj program mi smo sebi zadali nekoliko ključnih ciljeva. Jedan od njih je bio prvo strategija, pa onda nacionalni program razvoja. To su ova 2 strateška dokumenta koje smo imali za donijeti. Njih smo upravo dimenzionirali prema ovim problemima s kojima se danas susrećaju i koje sam malo prije spomenuo. Dakle, strategija održivog turizma. To u sebi sadrži zapravo i put kojim želimo ići. Brojke i tako dalje, sve je to nama važno, ali to ne može biti nikako prioritet. Iz toga proizlazi još jedan važan dokument, a to je Zakon o turizmu. Tim dokumentom zapravo želimo ozakoniti i dati zapravo, ozakoniti tu politiku koju proklamiramo, ali isto tako dati ono što je puno važnije, dati poluge po kojima možemo djelovati konkretno kako na razini države, tako a mislim što je puno važnije na lokalnoj razini, to je ona koja je najodgovornija uz naš suport naravno, kako upravljati destinacijom, kako upravljati prostorom za koji si dobio mandat da upravljaš. I tu ćemo sigurno i od planova upravljanja koje smo definirali, koji će se raditi do programa izračuna održivih kapaciteta i načina kako te dokumente kad ih donese lokalna razina moći implementirati u konkretne odluke, u konkretne akcije i doista djelovati na ono što se zapravo nama danas događa, a to je u mnogim destinacijama taj over turizam koji je sve prisutniji i na moru i na obali, to svi znamo. Evo jedan podatak, odnosno zadnji podaci Eurostata govore, recimo mi kad govorimo o našoj obali na kojoj se notabene odvija 95% našeg turističkog prometa, da je Hrvatska zapravo u Europskoj uniji zemlja zajedno sa Maltom sa najvećim brojem noćenja per capita, znači po glavi stanovnika, i onda to sve na jedan uski obalni pojas, 95% toga prometa se tamo događa, a da pritome je Hrvatska po pitanju održivosti prva sa gotovo 60%, 59% tog prometa se odvija u svega 3 mjeseca, to je znači od 6. do zaključno 8. mjeseca, a ta ista Malta s kojim dijelimo prvo mjesto po broju noćenja po glavi stanovnika je na posljednje mjesto sa 25%. Znači oni su uspjeli disperzirati na neki način taj svoj turistički promet koji je dosta velik, ali kroz cijelu godinu. Kod nas se to događa u 2 do 3 mjeseca na jednom uskom obalnom pojasu na koji je zapravo najugroženiji po svakom pitanju. Evo, to je nekako, dakle, i zbog toga proizlaze ovi svi dokumenti, ne samo za nas, to je odgovorno za svi, jer danas kad gurnete prst u more, onda ste povezani sa cijelim svijetom, ali povezani ste i u dobrom i u lošem smislu i sve ono što je loše, tu nema granica, ne postoje granice, tu moramo zajednički djelovati, ne samo Jadranska i Jonska ovo područje, nego cijeli Mediteran, pa i sva mora na ovom svijetu moraju biti očuvana jer su ona međusobno povezana. I u tom smislu je poruka svima nama i na državnoj razini i na lokalnoj i vas poduzetnika da stvarno u tom cilju djelujemo zajedno. Hvala vam puno.
I počeli smo s ovim citatom o povezanosti sa cijelim svijetom, ako se sjećate. Gospodin Glavina je to rekao, sad vi za kraj, evo kao da ste se dogovorili, odlično. Hvala vam puno, hvala prije svega vama panelisti, svi sudionici, vama dragi gosti koji ste došli. Sigurna sam da su otvorili i važne teme, korisne teme održivog nautičkog turizma. To nam je naravno i zajednički prioritet, a pokazali smo svakako da uz ekonomsku dobrobit moguće je i očuvati okoliš i sociokulturnu baštinu. Hvala još jednom svima puno i do neke sljedeće prilike. Lijep pozdrav.
Hvala vama.